Today, as we examine the ways that we can improve our HSC results, Paul has shared with us the way PDHPE analyse their HSC results using the RAP data package. The PE faculty use NESA's RAP data to get an overall picture of how our students perform in comparison to the state mean. They then drill down using the item analysis tool to get a better indication of how our students perform and where their strengths and areas for improvement are. So in this slide, you can see data coming from Section 1, Part A, multiple choice, Section 1, Part B, which is more short answers, and then Section 2, which is extended responses. And you can see in the data there that multiple choice is showing a 9.35% difference from the state mean, whereas Part B is showing a 19.6 difference, and then Section 2, 13.88 difference. So when we examine the multiple choice section, the analysis showed some areas of strength. Our students performed well in questions 8, 15, and 20. However, our student responses to questions 4, 5, 14, 16, 17, 18, and 19 were well below the state mean. So let's take a closer look at that. Question 8. Our students performed well answering this question. When examining the question to see what knowledge and skills the students required to answer this type of question, it was found they needed to understand data and statistics, and in particular, mortality rates that apply to cardiovascular disease. During the HSC course, this information is presented in graphs, tables, and text. We applied the same process to the other questions where our students performed above the state mean. And what was found was that our students performed well in comparison to the state mean when answering questions that required them to infer meaning from tables. When looking at areas for improvement, and in particular question 18, it was a difficult question none of our students correctly answered. This question required students to know syllabus terminology, for example, epidemiology and incidence. And they needed to examine trend data over time and also the nature of two different priority health areas, cardiovascular disease and cancer. Analysis of questions that our students underperformed in comparison to the state mean, showed that we need to teach students how to decode complex multiple choice questions, practice more questions that require students to examine graphs, and specifically core 2 questions that require students to apply their knowledge to questions where the examples may not be familiar to them. So looking at the short answer written response questions. NESA RAP data was used to create a graph to illustrate how our students performed, so our CPHS mean, in comparison to other students across the state, which is shown as a state mean in the lighter greeny grey colour. The results showed that our students underperformed in all questions in comparison to the state mean. Of the 3 sections of the examination, this is the section where our students performed the worst, at 19.6% below the state mean. So taking a closer look at this data. A detailed analysis of question 27, one of the questions that our students' results were the poorest, showed that most CPHS students placed in the 1 mark performance band. This shows that our students only provided some relevant information. Generally speaking, to access the higher bands or marks, our students needed to show the relationship between progressive overload, training thresholds, and physiological adaptations resulting from a 12-week aerobic training program. And they needed to draw out implications of the relationship between the progressive overload, training thresholds, and physiological adaptations. Analysis of questions found that our students underperformed in comparison to the state mean when answering some questions that contained higher order verbs such as assess and analyse. In 2020, PDHPE have begun to incorporate SEAL. So state, expand, apply, understanding and link the syllabus into their daily lesson practices to strengthen students' understanding of the verbs or directive terms and how to provide a written response to the questions. Section 2 is where we have our extended responses. So analysis showed that our school mean was 13.88% below the state mean. Again, NESA RAP data was used to create a graph to illustrate how our students performed, so our CPHS mean, in comparison to other students across the state, which is the state mean. In section 2, in the extended response, the results showed that our students performed close to the state mean with the exception of question 31B, where they underperformed. So taking a closer look at question 31. A detailed analysis of question 31B, one of the questions that our students' results were the poorest, showed that most CPHS students placed in the 3 to 4 mark performance band. The question required students to analyse. Our students only sketched in general terms, therefore placing them on average in the second lowest band bracket. This shows that our students needed to provide evidence of changes to the health of 2 population groups experiencing inequity. They needed to demonstrate knowledge of strategies and interventions that are implemented by governments to address the inequity, and they needed to limit the use of generalisations on health strategies. Finally, analysis of questions found that our students underperformed in comparison to the state mean when answering some questions that contained the higher order verbs such as assess and analyse. In 2020, PDHPE have begun to incorporate SEAL, so state, expand, apply, understanding and link to the syllabus into their daily lesson practices to strengthen students' understanding of the verbs and directive terms and how to provide written response questions. It is these areas that PE have identified as areas for improvement that are fairly consistent when we look at all of the data across our courses, and in particular, the areas where students have difficulty with the terminology, and most importantly, the application of the directive terms. And so this needs to be an area that we focus on for improvement.